some of us are becoming better humans, some of us are becoming worse human. It started with a lot of consumer technology, because consumer technology has kind of pushed our foray into kind of exposing ourselves in the community. So, aka social media, aka our need to be seen all the time and heard all the time, and as a result, very bad behavior all day long.
Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in. What does it mean to lead when our organizations are part human, part machine, and everything around us is evolving faster than we can make sense of it? That question sits at the heart of today's conversation, because leading in the age of AI isn't just about adopting new tools. It's about redefining how we think, decide, and connect as humans. I'm thrilled to welcome Faisal Hoque, a 3-time Wall Street Journal bestselling author and one of the world's foremost thinkers on the intersection of leadership, AI, and humanity. Faisal has spent over 30 years helping complex organizations from MasterCharge and GE and the Department of Defense navigate large-scale innovation and transformation. His writing, including books like Transcend and Everything Connects, challenges leaders to move beyond efficiency and scale and towards intention, ethics, and long-term human impact. In this episode, we explore how to lead hybrid teams of humans and machines, what it means to build emotional safety in a world shaped by algorithms, and why the real challenge of AI leadership isn't technical, it's moral and behavioral. So, welcome to the show, Faisal.
Thanks for having me.
You've fascinating background, but before we dive into the world of AI and leadership, I want to start with your personal journey a little bit, because the perspective you bring doesn't come from just one domain. You've built award-winning companies, advised global giants, and written deeply philosophical books. In Everything Connects, you explore how creativity, systems, and leadership intersect. Can you take us back to how that worldview took shape and how your personal journey shaped your thinking about leadership?
Yeah, look, I grew up in Bangladesh. I was born in Bangladesh. I came to US when I was 19 years old and started my college and then started my career in Fortune 500 and then started a series of tech companies. In my late 30s and mid 40s, I started to kind of retrace my route to Eastern philosophy, because I grew up with a lot of Eastern philosophy and literature. And I also started to travel across the globe and a lot of travels to Japan and other parts of Asian countries. And it kind of grounded me to that philosophical tenet that I grew up with. So as I kept writing, the writing kind of started to get influenced by this intersection of management, technology, and philosophy. Management as a leader and as somebody who runs companies and whatnot, and technology because I'm a technologist, and the philosophical aspect of all this is very deeply personal. And so it's a life journey. I mean, and every time I take on a new project.
No, that's great. So it's interesting. The Eastern philosophical roots. I would think that many people would see that as clashing with traditional go-get-it leadership points of view, right? Have you had to struggle with not just bringing those together, but dealing with the conflict that oftentimes exists between those two things?
Yeah, to be honest with you, when I look back in my, let's say 20s when I started my first company, and 30s when I had a quite successful global company, I wasn't at all thinking about philosophy or grounded or mindfulness or any of that stuff, right? But as I grow older, and as we all know, that times are very different than, let's say, when the internet started and when I started my career versus now. And I don't find it clashing at all, because I I actually find it highly productive, highly rewarding, and it's much more easier for me to influence and lead than I was, in my earlier days as a leader. So for me, that philosophical bent actually has made me not just better, but also much more creative and productive and fulfilled, and impactful, if I can use that word. So I don't look at it as at all, like this. There is a whole series of paradox that we can probably spend the rest of the day talking about. Like, often enough, when you go slow, you go fast. Often enough, when you take a step back, you have more clarity. Often enough, when you let go, things finds yourself, right? There's a whole slew of paradoxical things, and I'm very much of a proponent of this middle path, which comes from the Eastern philosophy and Buddhist philosophy, whereby you neither are one extreme or another extreme, and especially with AI, there's this massive fear, or there's is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm not on either one of those camp. I'm kind of like a ground and middle ground.
Awesome. So you talked about AI, you brought it up, and obviously it's going to be a part of our discussion, but let's shift from your journey to the moment we're all living through today. AI isn't just like another new tool. It's
Yep.
challenging like the very foundation of how we lead, make decisions, create value. And while the pace of change is dizzying, the deeper question is, how should leaders think differently? Now, I want to talk about your books, bring in your books. You have great books. I'm going to make sure I mention them or most of
Sure.
them through here. In Lift and Reinvent, you argue
Yeah.
that transformation isn't just a business challenge, it's a personal and systemic. What mindset shifts do you think are essential for leaders who want to not just survive AI, but use it as a force for human flourishing?
So I'll start with the fact that AI is not like another tool. If we just keep telling it's another tool, we're not really owning up to what humanity just emerged on. And by the way, the history of AI is long. It's not just last 3-4 years of generative AI. Many of us have been using AI, in predictive modeling and automation and workflows and etc. Right, and even consumer, when you watch a Netflix show and it's telling you what to see next, or when you are using GPS or you're looking at weather forecasting pattern, a lot of it is enabled by AI. But what is where we are headed towards, and then this is what became in the forefront of our discussion, is with generative AI, because it gave a natural language communication capability that we didn't have before. So that, and we're reaching the level of intelligence in these things. I mean, things in a collective system and application at a level where it's going to supersede human cognition level and human computing level for sure, right? So there's opportunity and there's a threat behind it, right? In the sense that we are going to be highly manipulated, and we're going to get highly dependent. We're going to get highly biased because our bias goes into the data, and then it biases us even more. And we're taking a lot of these things as a gospel, that if AI is telling you and if internet is telling you that it must be true, which is not necessarily the case, right? So when you look at all that, and there's also a shifting generation of workforce. There's a new generation of workforce that are entering, who are very fearful because a lot of as I was mentioning you, this piece that I wrote, because Anthropic CEO said that 50% of the white collar jobs are going to be gone in 5 years, and it's going to impact the entry level people. And I have a 22-year-old son, so they're going, the age group between 18 or 16 to 25, they're going to find themselves, they're having a very tough time what to do next. And so all of this has a huge impact, as a leader, as an organization, as an individual, and as a government. So this hybrid, it's going to be a hybrid in the sense that the world is going to be very hybrid workforce, hybrid market, hybrid, decision making process, et cetera, et cetera. Hybrid meaning human plus machine, the context of it, right? So we are going to start. We have already started to give human jobs to AI agents. So, for example, when you do these, let's say we do robocalls, or when we call up your car service. When you want to service your car and you're calling, it's no longer a person, or make airline reservation. Is it all automated agents, right? And that's from a consumer point of view, and in the corporate point of view, AI is already siphoning through resumes. AI is siphoning through, let's say, forecasting your demand. AI is siphoning through the best way to establish a supply chain model, a best way to craft your content, et cetera, et cetera. So you're outsourcing a great amount of work to this AI. So the question is, this is actually the question I was grappling with. I've talked about this as nauseum, but there's a different cut I took over the weekend. Asking, okay, so if everybody is outsourced, then what happens to the economy? Because machine don't buy anything. It's human being who buys anything. So that's a big question, right? And the second question is that, well, how do we create the next generation leaders if there is no entry level jobs? You need experience. You mentioned Lyft. One of the things I talked about in Lyft is that there is no substitute for experiential learning. You can read books, you can do whatever, but you need actual experience to get good at it. So if this younger generation doesn't have any kind of a entry-level experience, how do they mature as a senior workforce, right? And what does that do to the society? There's an economic impact, but there's also a geopolitical risk impact, because when people don't have purpose, that's when you see unrest. Because if you look at every conflict zone on the planet, is a young generation who doesn't have prospect in life. They're the one who creates. I mean, we have even seen in U.S. Remember during the pandemic, we had that, the unrest in Wall Street, and et cetera, over and over again. It goes on, and double all that. We keep talking about manufacturing job, which is already, we lost more momentum on that long time ago, if you talk about U.S. context. Now, if you think about, okay, you got this younger generation who are supposed to be, they're now being replaced by digital technology. You're going to create a ripple effect. It's not just a ripple; it's a wave of change that I don't know whether we are prepared to deal with or not. So there's an individual responsibility behind all this, because how do you upskill yourself and get ready for this, and how do you even stay positive if this is the case, right? There's a responsibility by the organization, which is run by leaders, in terms of how they automate and not to push the boundaries. So where a lot of people are losing jobs, because then you're also seeing example where there's pulling the trigger too fast and people are laying people off. Many organizations are laying people off, but as a result, it's having a negative impact on the organization. And what's the responsibility of government to put guardrail and reskilling the citizens so that we don't have a economic impact and geopolitical unrest? So all of that, it starts with leadership, obviously.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You talk about I have a son a little bit older than yours, and he's in tech already, and I see him. He's a product manager, spends a lot of his time working on AI, pretty much with the assumption that I'm going to have to do a lot of this stuff myself that I think engineers have done in the past. So I better get good at using the AI tools to be able to get the work done that I might have relied on engineers doing for me in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So your son, who's a product manager, is getting more engineering orientation, maybe not an engineer, but engineering orientation, because he's taking AI assistants to do, let's say, code generation as an example, right? So what will happen to the engineers? They're going to have to upskill so they become the product managers, not just focus on debugging code, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, a lot of this stuff is still very much of a hype because generated codes are not secure. They don't really doesn't have that sophisticated logic. It's like if you're a professional thinker and a writer, you're not going to accept AI generated writing because it's not going to meet your standards. The same with coding or anything else. So you can look at even a medical professional who say, okay, I got this symptom. What do you think? And there was the example of a couple of years back, Watson was being used for, the oncology. So we're not quite there yet, but within the next couple of years, we're going to be at a stage where jobs are going to certainly change. But I think also a lot of people are going to find themselves looking for something else. And that's where the danger comes in.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about those three levels, right? The individual, the organization, and sort of the government. I kind of feel like the individual question is almost the easiest of the three to answer, which is retool yourself. Sort of, I think of my son, right? Whatever you're doing, think about a future where AI is a part of that. And how do you get ready and skilled and prepared to upskill for whatever? But if we go to, let's skip the leader. We'll come back to the organization in a second. Do you have a sense? You ask these big
Yeah.
questions. Do you have any
Yeah.
answers for government?
A lot of innovation has happened in this country, but we highly depend on government in the sense that even if you look at the dawn of the internet came from DARPA. It's not a commercial company that created internet, right? Or look at the in industrial revolution, is the roads and the bridges that connected us. In the digital world, is the internet that connected us. And now you're going to have to deal with the AI, because AI lives in cloud. You can get into the nuances that you can have your own AI and own environment, but most of the stuff is it's managed by a handful of big vendors, right? So the big vendors should be working with government in terms of how that infrastructure is accessible, but also guarded, right? Because you think about like nuclear plants or nuclear energy. Not everybody goes and have access to nuclear energy. It's a handful of people, but there's a reason for it, right? But information technology is highly accessible. So this infrastructure behind the AI is critical for government to step in and help the process and create some standards, and which they're doing, by the way. It's not like nothing is happening. It's just very slow mode, right? So that's the second part of it. Another thing is, the government will have to encourage the human-centric innovation. So what does that mean? That means that the organizations that are focusing, let's say, preventable diseases or incurable disease. My son is a cancer survivor. So, there's a whole slew of AI applications and AI utilization that has a hope of curing cancer, and if not, create very patient-centric treatment that makes their the process of living much more tolerable, right? And the government also have to have a role in communicating better. They have to tell the story to not create a fearful environment, and highlight the positive notion and reward the organization, because government is a huge part of our economy. And most of us, one way or another, do business with government, so you have to, the government has the responsibility to create that positive narrative, and because that's ultimately creates that. And then they also have a huge role in reskilling, because it starts with high school. It starts with school, then goes to high school, then goes to college, and then also people who are the next generation folks that needs education. So the government needs to facilitate, or at some cases facilitate, some case lead, and some case literally make the financial investment so that we have that opportunity. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind as a country, but then as a globe in general.
Yeah, I want to go back to it's interesting let's stick on government for a little bit, then we'll move on to leaders. So, as you said, a lot of the governments tumble because of the unrest of the younger generation because their needs aren't being
Sure.
fulfilled. They have no purpose, right? And if AI flourishes in some direction, it take away their jobs. And so, on one hand, talking about yes, we should focus AI on things like helping to cure cancer, right? But that just creates more people and more people who are potentially more upset with government in the world, right? So how do they balance this sort of, in the ideal world, a government may say that the most control we'll have as AI flourishes is to have fewer people. We don't need as many. And how do I balance that with the idea of having people flourish?
So that's a deeply philosophical and ethical question, right? So it's not upon us to decide who lives and who dies and how we control population. That to me, that's highly unethical. What is ethical, I think, is to make sure that look, I mean, nature is very giving, but nature is also very cruel, right? So I mean, Mother Nature decides. It has one way of balancing things. I'm not a proponent of that we should develop technology so that all of a sudden we're now living 200 years, each of us. There's a natural course of living and dying, and each one of us has to, contribute something to the world, and as a result, we mature to the next level, right? I mean, so if you look from that context, what I'm saying is that by if we shouldn't be in a situation where now we are forget about flourishing humanity. We're actually killing humanity because we have lots of people who are jobless and less opportunity and more underprivileged communities, et cetera, right? I mean, we've seen some of those during the digital divide situation in COVID. One communities, really risen up because they had digital access, and they continued. Other community couldn't because they didn't have digital access. So I mean, so there is that ethical, equal. Look, life is not fair. It's never 100% equal anything, but we have responsibility to one another. Otherwise, we're not human. Otherwise, we're animals. Because when you're really into like Darwinism, survival of the fittest, and I'm just gonna take whatever I can and move with it, right? So I think that there's a natural course of things, and that's where that middle path comes in play, right? I mean, we shouldn't be doing any harm. If we can do any good, at least we should not be doing any harm. That's my personal philosophy, right? And taking care of a fellow human being, it couldn't be a greater call than that as a leader. If you can't do that, then forget about being a leader. You're not even being a basic basic human being, right? So that can get very broad in the sense that whatever each one of us are doing impacts. And I honestly believe, and I live by this quote, that when everybody succeed, you succeed. It's the motto of our country. All for one and one for all, right? So I've never had to wear a uniform, but I did work with military a lot. That's the motto that our military brothers and sisters lives by, right? So if as leaders we cannot do that, then we have failed humanity, and it stems from there.
If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We've got plenty more great stories coming your way. So I would say I love your projection of that point of view across government. I wish government and all the people in government held that same point of view the same way you're projecting it on them. So we'll leave it at that. Let's talk about leaders for a second. So
Sure.
I You discussed earlier about the notion of hybrid workforce, which of course, when you say it, everyone's thinking, yeah, I work at home and I work there. And no, you use it in the context of, jobs could be done part human, part system, right? And you also use this metaphor in Transcend of the AI orchestra with the leader as the conductor. What does the role of a leader or conductor of an AI orchestra, and how does that fit into the model of the hybrid
Sure.
work you see?
Look, we have been talking about leaders being systemic thinker for a long time, but most of the successful leaders are actually very good in emotional intelligence, and they orchestrate, in a way so that other people can flourish. As a result, organization can flourish. So in a hybrid environment, you actually have to be equally good system thinker because you're managing lots of systems, right? So it's not just you're managing emotional workers, you're actually managing systems that does partial, a portion of your work, right? So here comes the balance between what's too much, what's too little, how much automation should I be doing, and what is the impact that's going to have on my customer, on my employees, and on my brand, right? So the leaders are going to have to think about their brand effect, their customer effect, and I'm talking about business leaders now, and their ability to craft business model that's kind of balances this human need, the community economic impact, and their ability to sell goods and service with the emotional connection to the human being. Without a shadow of a doubt, there will be product and services that will not require any kind of human, connection, right? So for example, like I said, are we going to have all self-driving cars? No, some of us are actually car nuts, right? So we're gearheads and we like to drive our own cars. I happen to be one of them. So if I'm in a new city, I'm in, I don't know, somewhere in Latin America, and I want a self-driving car to come and pick me up, maybe, but on a regular basis, I don't want a self-driving car. I want my car, right? So I think this is the balance, like what's too much and what's too little. So leader job in a very pragmatic way is to design the business model or drive the business model that balances this, but also design the system that also balance. So I think a few weeks back, I wrote an article, how do you apply empathy when you're doing system design? So here's a good example. So for example, let's say a healthcare system, you go to your health portal and you're middle of the night, you're worried about your last checkup you had and you haven't gotten the result yet. And you go to your health portal and the health portal tells you, test inconclusive, make an appointment with your provider immediately. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not a very human-centric response by a system. The system design that kind of response. The people design that kind of response. So how about we change that by saying, we didn't get this, get that. I know I know you may be worried. Your service provider will be calling you. I'm making a note for the service provider to call you. But that's like a human-centric design approach with empathy because you're caring about the patient who is worried 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So this requires the next level of, emotional intelligence, empathy, whatever you want to call it, and lead from that context so that your employees or your teammates and the people that you're working thinks from that context because now you're training your digital workforce to behave like human and kind of mimic the emotional pattern, not just this logical and system patterns, if you want to have that hybrid world to be successful as business leader.
So it's interesting. You brought up empathy, and I was going to ask you about how do you actually elevate the uniquely human traits like empathy, intuition, and creativity. But before I want to hold that for a second because I want to hit on to some degree, you can answer the question of that empathy and emotional intelligence with a simple prompt, right?
Yes.
So the prompt can be, when you interact with a customer, think of yourself as a very empathetic customer service
Yes.
rep and treat so to some degree we can learn that and mimic empathy and mimic intuition and maybe creativity. How do we actually elevate the human parts of it? Or we don't need those human parts anymore. We can actually replicate them well enough in the systems that we don't need human empathy, human intuition, and human creativity anymore.
Well, I mean, if we don't have that, then we lost as humanity as a whole altogether, right? Because you're still living in a human society and you're interacting with each other. So I would say that, the basic thing that maybe your parents told you, be kind, be polite, and treat somebody else like you would treat yourself. As right, so those basic knowledge, I think, will be even more important. And by the way, just because you're interact, so it's a behavioral pattern. Humans are very habitual and so if you are now using a lot of AI tools, and pretty soon you're going to have AI assistant and you're going to have AI coworker, I actually argue that you should extend that behavioral pattern even to a system, because for two reasons. Because that's why you're you're practicing your humanity with a system, even though it's a system. As a result, you're elevating your humanity so that when you do work with another human being, you're maintaining that agency, right? As that's one. Second is that these AI engines are learning from our behavioral patterns, right? So the more of us maintain that agency and interact with these things and teaching these things with that level of, just like I was giving you that example of, well, as a system. So what do I care? Code. If this person has that, then just put this blur of thing. I'm not thinking how that person is reacting. Then I'm not really applying my human agency. But if I am thinking that way, then I'm actually elevating my agency along with the system agency, right? So it goes both ways. So in many ways, there perhaps a bigger opportunity to elevate our creativity and our agency and our intuition better, because now we have a layer which is non-human. It's something else, right? So I think that's one way of kind of transcending humanity to the next level.
Awesome. Now, I want to go to reinvent now. In reinvent, you emphasize the transformation. Transformation requires fluency, not perfection. So for leaders who aren't technologists, what are some practical ways they can build that fluency with the AI without needing to be like technocrats or engineers?
Yeah, look, it starts with very, very fundamental things. I mean, we all there's like two type of people, right? Whereby there's one type of people, just good enough. You're just like, just kind of like coasting along, and but most of the successful leaders are perfectionists. They want to get things right, and sometimes they get overblown in terms of their perfection, right? Because things are changing so fast, and things are what was true yesterday is not going to be true tomorrow. That fluency becomes even more important, because if you're chasing perfectionist, you're going to keep missing the mark. You may be perfect, but you'll be missing the mark, right? So there's a balance. So the balance is, take your time to think through, take your time to think about the impact, and then move forward with things. It's like, I think it's Einstein who said, like, whenever I have a problem, I spend 90% of the time thinking about it, and then 10% of the time kind of trying to come up with a solution. So that stepping back and being fluid with things changes is more important, and not get hung up with perfectionism, because that's not going to get you anywhere. By the time you're perfect, it's already changed, so it's no longer applicable, whatever you have come up with.
Cool. So I want to shift a little bit, which is and talk about the book in Survive to Thrive. Like a lot of the things we're talking about now are about transitions to organization, right? No matter what your view is around AI, I think we all agree that organizations are going to have to go through lots of change going forward in governments, right? And you talk about the fact that transition can trigger real anxiety inside of teams. And you explore the power of resilience. So I'm wondering if you can share sort of your thoughts on moments where psychological safety or the threat of anxiety or its absence of safety shape the course of a transformational efforts, and what can a leader do to reinstall that or to amplify that resilience and the sense of safety on their teams?
Look, I think it's so. Let's start with the individual level because when I wrote "Survive to Thrive," it really started with the individual mindset, right? So, I mean, one of the things about this when things are when your back is against the wall, that's what triggers anxiety, and because you're constantly fighting, right? So there's an anticipatory grief factor to it, like and you have to call what it is in the sense that if you say, look, I'm worried about losing my job, you have to own to the fact that you're going to lose your job. Or if you're worried about that, I'm not moving up, I will never move up because I don't have this kind of skill set, whatever. You have to own up to it because it's like that first step to grief is to acknowledge and accept what that is. It's the same thing about forward-looking anxiety that I have to accept where I am and how the world is shifting, right? So it starts with that, and that's actually the foundation to me for resiliency because that kind of prepares you. What do you need to do to cope up with this stuff, and as a result, it makes you strong. Now, a leader's job is to create that environment where people can act that way. They can be themselves and they can kind of own to the feeling and express the feeling and be able to talk about it and not look at, and perceive as a weak person because they're anxious or have some sort of a worry about where future is and where things are moving, right? So the leader's job goes back to orchestration is to orchestrate an environment where people can be themselves and they can kind of explore these forward-looking grief, and deal with the preparation of what will happen if I do lose this. What can I fill up the blank, with whatever I can fill it up, because as we all know, life is a journey and it's never the same, right? I mean, things are always transitioning. It's not whether if it's AI or whether it's COVID or whether it's some geopolitical shift, whatever the case may be, it's always changing. So if you accept that and you kind of move forward with that knowledge, both as a individual and as a leader, you're better prepared.
Awesome. Well, now I'm going to shift gears again because we're sort of getting towards the end and ask a couple philosophical questions, as if we
Sure.
haven't been philosophical enough. But you open it up with your books. You ask very big questions, and in
Sure.
Transcend, you ask a provocative one, right? Not just how can we lead with AI, but what kind of humans will we become in the process? So I want your honest take. What kind of humans do you think we're becoming?
Look, I mean, I'm going to give you a kind of some of us are becoming better humans, some of us are becoming worse human. It started with a lot of, consumer technology because consumer technology has kind of pushed our foray into kind of exposing ourselves in the community. So, AKA social media, AKA our need to be seen all the time and heard all the time, and as a result, very bad behavior all day long, and so AI kind of actually is going to accelerate that process even further because now we can be even more anonymous, more obnoxious, and more unkind to each other in many different ways. So, or we can take the example that if we do practice what we just talked about, that be more empathetic, maybe more conscious about how we interact with ourselves. I mean, as with other human, but also with machine, we have a chance to kind of elevate ourselves, right? Where will we end up? That will be the collective decision. It's not human society would be whatever it collectively we decide. And that's the beauty of human being. And there's a beauty in that too, right? Because it creates a very checkered society, and we kind of live with it, and kind of look at the beauty and the ugliness of humanity at the same time.
Cool. Now, when you think about the future of AI and humanity, what emotion shows up for you most often? Hope, fear, awe, something else?
It's both. It depends on the day. Because so I am very hopeful and excited as a technologist that it does. We can already do so much more that we couldn't do before. Take research as an example, like your son's ability to maybe look at 10 different product option as a product manager versus just coming up with one product idea and one prototyping that takes months and months, right? So these are all exciting stuff. I can generate ideas for a research hook, within an hour that would have taken me months, right? So these are all exciting stuff. What worries me is, the manipulation, the biases, identity theft, intellectual property theft, being marginalized, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, I don't know where we will end up being, and then also, I think that this divide initially, I think is going to be huge, where people with AI, people without AI, people displaced with AI. I think that's going to be very dramatic, just like we've seen in manufacturing industry when the industrial revolution started happening. But it's far greater than anything we have ever seen in our human history.
This is great. I'm going to close out with just some questions I ask all of my guests, a little less philosophical than those two. So you can take a breath. First one is, what's one leadership skill that you think will become even more important in the future?
I think it's the notion of collection of these human agency, which really a lot of people dub it as emotional intelligence. I think that's going to be in high demand because you're going to have to be a very conscious leader.
Great. Now, if you can wave a magic wand, which I give all my guests for just a moment, it's too dangerous to have you out in the real world. But if you could immediately make things change, what would you do to make organizations more human-centric?
I think it's the leader's ability to pause and think. Most of the leaders out there are extremely reactive. They don't even take 10 minutes to think about a lot of different things. So this ability to pause and step back and think about the impact, not just the short term, but the long term. That's one of the things that I would change in almost every organization that I walk into.
And what's one final piece of advice you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Push for humanity, not just machines and technology.
Awesome. Awesome. And finally, where can our listeners follow your work and go deeper into the ideas you champion?
You can find me on my website, which is faisalhoque.com, and you will see my companies. I have multiple companies that part of my portfolio. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post, share all these very freely all day long, all month long. And by the way, books and the contents all for charity. So all my book proceed goes to cancer research, and so I hope you access them for your benefit. But also, if you buy a book, it will help somebody in need.
And I will tell our listeners that the books were worth it, even without thinking about it as a donation to cancer research. So great books, great content. And thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
I hope this conversation has sparked new thinking about how leadership can evolve to meet the challenges and opportunities of AI, not just by sidelighting humanity, but by putting it at the very heart of transformation. For all of you listening, remember, leading in the age of AI is not about competing with machines. It's about elevating the human spirit, values, and connection that technology alone can't replace. Now let's move into the after show, where I'll reflect on some of my key takeaways from this conversation and to discuss how leaders can navigate the complexities of AI while keeping humanity at the center of their decision-making. Welcome to the After Show, where I'm excited to share some thoughts about my discussion with Faisal Hoque. And if you felt this conversation stretch your thinking, you're not alone. Faisal brings a rare depth to the AI and leadership conversation. Yes, he's a technologist. Yes, he's helped Fortune 100s and federal agencies navigate massive change. But what sets him apart is the philosophy he brings with him, the way he draws from Eastern traditions to ground his thinkings in paradox, reflection, and intention. And that gave the conversation a very different kind of weight. Here are 5 key insights I took away from the discussion. The first is that transformation isn't technical. It's a test of leadership behavior. Faisal challenged the popular idea that AI is just another tool. He said, if we keep calling it that, we're not owning up to what humanity just emerged on. Transformation, in his view, isn't about the speed of adoption. It's about the quality of awareness. And that shift requires leaders to be more reflective, not just more reactive. The second takeaway is that hybrid leadership means conducting both humans and machines. Faisal reframed hybrid not as remote versus in office, but as a new orchestration between human judgment and machine execution. Leaders must become conductors of what he called the AI orchestra. And just like in traditional Eastern thinking, he warned against extremes, either total automation or total resistance. The power, he suggested, lies in the balance. The third idea is that empathy must be designed into systems. He told a striking story about a 2 a.m. visit to a healthcare portal where a cold clinical message triggered fear instead of care. For Faisal, this wasn't a UX issue. It was a failure of emotional design. And he made the case that true empathy requires presence and forethought, qualities long championed in mindfulness traditions, but now urgently needed in system architecture. The fourth takeaway is that we're removing the rungs from the leadership ladder. As AI automates more foundational roles, Faisal warns that we may be erasing the experiential learning that once shaped strong leaders. There's no substitute for lived experience, he said. And without it, we risk creating a generation of leaders who have insight without grounding, ambition without wisdom. The fifth takeaway is that the future of humanity is a leadership decision. When I asked what kind of humans we're becoming, he answered with honest clarity. Some better, some worse. Some better, some worse. It's a collective decision. That line, rooted in both pragmatism and spiritual awareness, underscores his belief that leadership today isn't just about scaling businesses. It's about shaping what we value, protect, and pass on. So let me leave you with 2 questions. As AI reshapes your organization, how are you reshaping yourself? And more importantly, how are you helping others stay human in a machine-accelerated world? Because leadership isn't just about what we build. It's about what we choose to preserve. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.